Hi Siri, I'm looking for a new podcast, one that preferably is hosted by a UF Hall of Famer, one that airs every weekday that would bring me everything I need to know about the Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions. Siri, is there such a show?
Have you heard of PodUp with Matthews in the morning on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or any podcast platform?
Oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? UF Hall of Famer Shane Matthews has a show every weekday. I'm gonna go check it out tomorrow. Thanks, Siri.
Good morning. You're looking live at a Wednesday edition of PodUp with Matthews in the morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to carry. Got a good show lined up today. We're going to kick it off here in just a second with Graham Hall, and then we'll have Mike Morgan from ESPN, SEC Network, kind of looking forward to conference play in basketball starting. He'll have a bunch of games in the SEC. Not a whole lot going on in the sports world, but we're going to go to a guy that does know some stuff going on the Titan More hotline, courtesy of Duffield Home Improvements. Graham Hall. Good morning, Graham. How you doing, buddy?
Good morning. How you doing? Good to be here in the new year and talk all things Florida football.
Yes. So that's, with the not dead period, but it's kind of a dead time with the holidays and such with the bowl games. I think the portal is getting ready to close. The Gators are hosting some other guys this weekend. Can you fill us in on who is probably going to be on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, the portal is such a confusing beast at times that even though the portal, quote unquote, closed at midnight for guys to enter the transfer portal, there is still a possibility for guys to enter the portal in the coming days based on certain eligibility requirements, what their academic circumstances are, whether they're a graduate transfer or not. So you could still see some flurry of portal activity here in the coming days. And the other thing I think that makes it tough for fans to follow is that this isn't just a weekend thing now. You're going to have people on campus for visits starting today. Really, people were arriving yesterday in town for official visits, transfers, and Florida has at least 3 players right now in Gainesville that they are hosting on visits. A couple will leave tomorrow at the edge position. I can talk about a couple of those guys. One is George Gums, a guy from Northern Illinois at a position of need, an edge. He's going to fly out of Gainesville on Thursday. He's meeting with the staff throughout the day. Another one is Cassius Howell, another edge player, a guy who from Bowling Green who got some eligibility remaining, has a little experience. Certainly, at a position of need, you look at who Florida has lost there, losing Princely. I know they get Justice Boone back, but you have guys that also maybe could play that jack linebacker spot where you just saw some attrition in the form of losing Scooby Williams, a guy who was, able to play that inside-outside linebacker role. And then another one that I think maybe fans saw over the last couple of days is a preferred walk-on quarterback in Aiden Warner, a guy from the Winter Park area who enrolled at Yale, has, I think, 4 years of eligibility remaining. I think that's someone who would be a wise addition for Florida, just given the depth of the quarterback position. I know that they bring back, Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway, and don't get mistaken. Those are the guys that Florida is focused on at the signal caller position. If you even saw those comments from DJ Lagway over the past couple of days, he expects to come in and compete like he's going to be a guy seeing the field in his first year. Some people have already made those comparisons to, Chris Leak and Tim Tebow. And I say, let's not get ahead of ourselves too much. But I do think in terms of how Florida may try and have some packages in year one for DJ Lagway, while Graham Mertz is the leader at quarterback, I think you could absolutely see that in 2024. But you need to have some depth at the position, similar to what Florida did last year by going out and getting Micah Leon to come in and be a veteran signal caller behind Jack Miller and Max Brown. You need to have preferred walk-ons in the building who can lead that scout team. I know that there are guys who played the position who can speak to that a lot more than me, but this is a guy from the area that is available right now. The staff likes him. And I would be surprised, honestly, if you don't see a decision made on his end in the coming days here, now that he's on campus right now. I believe he actually leaves Gainesville today from his visit. And then over the next few days, leading up through the weekend, through Friday and into Saturday, Florida is going to host a few other players. Some of those are I hope people can understand this. Sometimes when you've gained this information and the staff has communicated it to you, there can be a little bit of, hey, let's not put all these names out here, especially if they're players from the SEC. And Florida is going to have a transfer visiting from the SEC in the next couple of days. And sometimes they want to keep that a little bit quiet so nothing can get messed up. Maybe if they're committed elsewhere, the other program that they're committed to can come in and squash that visit. Florida's going to have some of these guys on campus over the next few days between today and Saturday. Florida, I believe, is going to have 8 players on campus for visits. So this is going to be an absolute, flurry of activity. Like I said, it's not going to be just the weekend. There's going to be midweek visits, and that's going on right now in Gainesville.
Yeah. What is, I hear people talking all the time because, they look at, you said we have a defensive lineman or edge rusher from Northern Illinois. I think people get so worried when you're looking at these, they're not coming from a Power Five, but look, man, there's been a bunch of people that have transferred to Power Five schools from smaller schools that have been really good players. Jared Verse is one of them, Florida State. Do you get that a lot, Graham? People asking you, why are we looking at the South Alabamas and Northern Illinois type players?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of that is warranted. The questions, I always hate to see players dismissed and say, oh, they're never going to contribute here when they come to this level of football. Because like you just said, you gave one from Jared Verse, a guy who comes from FCS Albany, right? Albany State or something like that, goes to FSU, and now he's a potential, top 50 draft pick, had a great, tenure at FSU. And that's not the only one. You see it all around the country. You can even add players from the JUCO level who are able to come in and contribute right away. It's about evaluations, obviously, that you watch the film. I know that people sometimes get frustrated hearing this, but this coaching staff is very thorough in their evaluations, sometimes to the point where they miss out on some of the high profile names and are able to target more of those guys that they believe are going to exceed where they were playing previously. Now, with all that said, I think that the stuff that is warranted, you can definitely take some flyers on a lot of those guys, and some of them will pan out. But what you do want to see is that you are going after and getting players who have experience at the Power 5 level. You're going to need some of those. And I think where Florida's at right now, they do need to add players who have experience at the Power 5 level, because this is a roster that was extremely young last year. They're going to need to add experience, guys who can play year one. And those questions are just going to be potentially more relevant when you're not adding players from the SEC. And so you got to have a mix. But just because someone comes from, a G5 conference or, FCS or JUCO does not mean that they are going to be unable to contribute. That we got to take, I think, a little bit more of a wait and see approach with a lot of these guys, certainly, because they can be able to come in and perform. But yeah, you also want to make sure that you're adding players with experience. And I do think that Florida's evaluating a good mix of guys. Like I mentioned, there's going to be a transfer visiting from the SEC here in the next couple of days, guys coming in from, Pac-12 as well, who Florida's going to be looking at. You can have your guys from Northern Illinois and Bowling Green, absolutely. But I do think that the concerns about making sure that you're targeting players who are capable of playing in the SEC is certainly a valid concern for people, but you got to take a wait and see approach until the games actually arrive, right?
Yes, Bob on the Titan More text line had a question. How many guys are we allowed to sign at this point? I guess how many scholarships do we have out there?
That's a really good question. If you go back to the December window, Florida signed 17 freshmen. They've added 4 transfers, and you're going to see, I think, a few more guys that maybe have some decisions to make, whether it's regarding the NFL draft. I know the portal window is closed, but you also, some of the guys that you signed in December are not going to arrive. 3 of them aren't going to arrive until May. So that maybe gives you a little bit of a leeway of 4 to 5 additions that you could make here. And I also think that there's going to be some guys who were maybe put on scholarship from last year that won't return to the program. A few guys that may graduate in spring that gives you a little bit more leeway when May arrives to add some talent. But the truth of the matter is that Florida is pretty close to that 85-man scholarship limit. They're going to probably be able to add 4, 5, 6 guys potentially here in the coming weeks, but it's not going to be, from what I understand, and of course this could change, so don't hold me to it, of course. But I from what I'm looking at their scholarship chart, they're looking at about 4 to 5, maybe 6 more additions in this window, and then you'll obviously be able to reevaluate things after spring. The whole key is having enough scholarship guys on campus for spring camp. And it looks like Florida's going to be able to do that. Absolutely. Because of where they're at right now. And everyone looks at the significant attrition, sees 19 guys entering the portal, and they think, oh, are we going to be able to field a roster? But the reality is that Florida is really close to that limit already, and they should be able to have no problem with that.
Yeah. So, I keep getting ever since, it's been the last month or so, people still think Billy Napier is going to hire an offensive coordinator. I personally don't see it happening. What are you hearing, and what are your thoughts on that?
I haven't heard anything from the coaching staff side. When we talked to Billy at early signing day, 2 weeks ago, he said that one step at a time, had to hire a nutritionist, had to hire a new strength and conditioning coordinator. Obviously, he was still in the mix of hiring a defensive line coach that arrived in the form of Gerald Chapman, a guy that I think can be really, really good here. But what's been communicated to the players who have signed, including DJ Lagway, is that they expect right now Billy Napier to be the guy calling plays. And we've talked about this a lot. Florida's offense improved throughout the year. I think that this is going to be a different offense with having DJ Lagway here and what they have. But I don't expect wholesale changes. Maybe there's going to be, offensive analysts added. That wouldn't surprise me, because this is a staff that is always looking to add people behind the scenes who can help run practices, who can work with the quarterbacks. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they end up doing, but going the full offensive coordinator route, I'm not certain that's going to happen. Now, it certainly is possible, but over the last few weeks, you've seen guys like, Brennan Marion thrown out there. People were all about Willie Korn. Maybe they changed their minds when they watched that Oregon Liberty game, but I don't expect that right now. I don't say it's impossible, but from what we've heard, I don't think that is absolutely a given in any way. It's certainly possible. Florida's still evaluating some things, and maybe they have a surprise up their sleeve. But what's been communicated to some of these high-profile signees, especially coming from the word of mouth of DJ Lagway, you sign a guy like that, I think you would communicate the plans to him about who's going to be his offensive coordinator. And what he's indicated over the past couple of days is that he expects Billy Napier to be the guy calling plays. And until that changes, I do think that people should maybe adjust their expectations around hearing, expecting that it's going to be Billy Napier. Again, it could change, absolutely, but I don't think it's anywhere close to a given. And a few months ago, people were saying in November that there's got to be a change. There's got to be a change. How could there not be a change? Maybe that frustrates people, but I do think when you break down what Florida did well last year, was it perfect? No, but the offense, in my opinion, was not the problem. And I think that people should stop harping on the fact of, if there's not an offensive coordinator in here, that so-and-so is doomed, or it's not going to be a successful operation. If the defense improves and Florida's offense is able to keep making the progressions that they made throughout last year, I think that it's going to be a null and void issue. But we'll end up seeing here, certainly, because some things can change. You could have unexpected attrition. Guys could still take jobs on your role for the NFL level. I mean, last year we saw 2 coaches leave in February. So I'm not ruling anything out in that regard, but I don't think it's extremely likely that Florida hires an offensive coordinator. We'll see, but yeah, I doubt it.
I agree with that. 1966 HBC beers available at Spurs Gridiron Grill, Gator Games in the O-Dome, and select retail outlets. Crisp American Lager 1966 HBC beer. Speaking with Graham Hall on the Titan MR hotline, courtesy of Duffield Home Improvements on YouTube, brought to you by Quality Plumbing. Christopher wants to know, is any word on Montrell Johnson staying? I haven't heard of him leaving.
I haven't heard of him leaving either. I don't think that's going to be one that's not really on my radar. I think he would have obviously indicated that by now. I think, being a Billy Napier guy who committed to Billy at Louisiana, followed the coaching staff here. Jabbar Jalouk is still here. They're really impressed with the 2 running backs that they added last, in December, and Kanan Daniels and Jaden Baugh. Those are 2 guys that they kind of, I had the term described to me as this 2-headed monster who's going to be able to come in and complement each other. And, I think that's 3 backs, with Johnson being the lead back, that you're going to be seeing the field in 2024. I don't know if they're going to add a portal guy. Maybe they do what they did last year and go out and get a veteran back who can complement that room. But, the expectation from what I'm hearing is that Montrell Johnson is a full part of this team in 2024. Until that changes, I would expect him. I'll go back to that Billy Napier quote from early signing day. He told everyone on the roster, I respect your decisions. In January, you need to be either in or you're out. It is January 3rd. Again, there were some unexpected moves. I think Scooby Williams wasn't one that was entirely anticipated. The coaching staff likes him from what I was told, but I think that, it now being January 3rd, Florida's roster is pretty much, the returnees. I don't think many of them are going anywhere. Maybe someone still makes an NFL decision. Guys like we'll see with Jason Marshall for sure, but I would expect Montrell Johnson to be back.
Yeah, I think the running back room is going to be perfectly fine. If you look at running backs are just like how the NFL looks at running backs nowadays. You're not going to pay a guy a lot of money to play running back for you in college. Look at the 4 teams. Blake Corum's a good running back, a great running back at Michigan, but he doesn't get every carry. Etienne was a good football player, but he's walking into a place that's got a lot of really good running backs, and he better work on his pass blocking if he wants to play for Georgia. That's just my 2 cents. But we got another question here on the Titan MR text line. I'm sorry, the Titan MR text line. It's from Robert. It's basically talking about, Graham, you already kind of covered it, about defensive players. We need to add defensive players. Let's talk about Scooby Williams. He played a little bit last year as a starter, struggled at times, made some plays, but I don't think that's a huge loss. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I definitely, that was a guy that I think the word potential is the most relevant, not to use a cliche. I mean, you go back to spring when Florida was, holding their pro day in the end of March here, there were NFL scouts there who were watching Scooby Williams work out, who were saying, who is that guy? He could be great. He could be, an excellent player. And I think that that's possible. He was just a third-year guy, first year starting this past year. But you go, and obviously Pro Football Focus grades, not to, rip them and anything. They're not perfect, but I do think that obviously the grades for Williams indicated that he still has room to grow, had made some mistakes last year. I think where it could be a loss is if he ends up going to another SEC program or a Big Ten program, and he becomes a prolific player and capitalizes on that potential, because then you would have rather had that in Gainesville, right? You need to stockpile players going into their 4th, 5th year who are able to reach their potential rather than resetting every single year. And maybe those fears are a little bit warranted right now, because you see guys like Scooby Williams and Jaden Hill. Those 2 guys are taking visits to Texas A&M this week here. So if they end up landing in the SEC, him and Jaden Hill, if they end up playing for that defense and playing at a high level, similar to maybe like Tyron Hopper, a guy who leaves the program, had a lot of potential at linebacker, goes to Missouri, and then he's one of the best linebackers in the entire SEC. If that happens with Scooby Williams and he becomes kind of like maybe even Antoine Powell Ryland Jr., a guy who leaves your program and then it just has great production and really looks good and you would have liked to have him, then it's a loss. So this is, again, kind of a wait and see type thing here. I don't think it's necessarily we can say, oh, it's not a huge loss or it's a huge loss. I think there's a possibility that this is someone you would have liked to have back here, but he also, not to rip someone, it could be like a Chris Bogle type loss where they go somewhere else and then you see, hey, this is someone who wasn't able to contribute at the next place. We were able to replace him, bring someone else new here. It's not that big of a deal. We're going to have to wait and see. I think the whole thing that may concern some people is that, like I said, you want to keep guys like this who are able to contribute. Even if you bring in someone who's more talented, someone who has experience in your system, has potential, you need capable backups. Injuries can happen at any time. If Scooby Williams is able to be a guy who plays well for whether it's the Aggies or any other SEC program, you would have liked to have that guy on your roster. So we're going to have to wait and see and reflect on this a little bit next year and say, oh, this was a big loss, or, oh, it's one that Florida probably didn't mind losing.
Andy asked on Facebook Live, brought to you by Mellon Law. He says, Graham, do you think Coach Spurrier had anything to do with the new strength and conditioning hire since he was with him at South Carolina?
It's possible. It certainly is. I think that maybe, a guy like Steve Spurrier could vouch for someone like that. I do think that this is a staff that does their due diligence. Maybe Rob Sale has a relationship with him as well, considering that, both guys were with the Giants. I think that you look at Fitzgerald's pedigree, working with Bill O'Brien, a guy who was also at Alabama. Maybe there's a little overlap, some familiarity there. I don't know if this is a case where, Billy Napier is necessarily reaching out to Steve Spurrier and saying, hey, who do you think we should hire? But I do think it helps regardless when you're hiring someone and Steve Spurrier comes out and says, yeah, that guy, he absolutely was massive for me. If that is what you're hearing from Steve Spurrier, I think that has to reassure you as Billy Napier, but I don't think it's a case where he had a lot of influence in the decision. I do think it certainly helps getting him vouching for it, but I would be surprised if Napier absolutely consulted him and said, hey, in your experience, who helped you, who's still out there? If he did say that about Fitzgerald, I think it's a promising hire, but I do think this is just a kind of an overlap where someone worked with Steve Spurrier and now Billy Napier brings him in here. And I think that makes it a wise hire. We'll obviously have to wait and see here, because maybe one of the big problems is that everyone gets really, really excited about the new strength and conditioning coordinator when they come in and there's all these articles come out, and maybe you can blame people like myself for that. We're just reporting what the players tell us, but everyone always says the new strength and conditioning coach is getting me in the best physical condition. And then sometimes when things go wrong here, the strength and conditioning coach is one of the first ones to get the blame. And I think that this is a situation where it will go based on how Florida's development goes. If Florida does not develop the way that they want to, there's going to be people saying, hey, it's not Fitzgerald. He's not the guy. We see that time and time again here. So it definitely is a high profile position where you're going to get a lot of blame if the talent on your roster does not develop. I think certainly Fitzgerald working at South Carolina, a place that's not going to get a ton of blue chip prospects, but yet they had the most prolific winning season in South Carolina history. I think that really bodes well for what he can do.
We got a text on the Titan More text line. It's extremely long. I'm going to paraphrase here. It's from Fred, and it's regarding he's upset that we're losing all these players, that we're going to redo the swamp, take the money that we're going to use for that and pay the players. Okay. I'm going to say this for the 1000th time. The money that goes to the University of Florida in donations has nothing to do with buying a player, or I should say buying a player, paying a player to come to your school. That is all a separate entity through Florida Victorious. So get that out. I wish I could put a bulletin across my show here for every day. That has nothing to do with redoing the stadium. Am I correct, Graham?
100%. I think that they are intrinsically linked in a sense. When you donate to NIL, you increase the chances of the head coach being able to bring in the talent maybe that they desire. Billy Napier has nothing to do with the swamp being renovated, just like he has nothing to do with them doing an $8 million renovation to the basketball practice facility. That is entirely separate funds. That's on the athletic department to raise. I think that maybe if you're a fan and you're a little bit conflicted about NIL, you have another thing potentially to debate giving your money to. Are you going to donate to the talent acquisition aspect of it through Florida Victorious, or are you going to donate to having the swamp renovated, having state-of-the-art facilities? And in my opinion, I think that NIL is a little bit more worthwhile donating to right now. I think that if you look at where college football is heading, and I'll try and wrap this up quickly, you see college football playoff expansion. Everyone maybe wonders, is this a good thing for us? Is it a good thing for us? I'll tell you where it's a good thing for you. Every school in the Power 5 conference, based on that TV rights deal, adding 8 more playoff games is going to increase the amount of money that the schools are going to get in revenue. And that's going to go into the athletic department. That's going to help to fund things like renovations and stuff like that. That's going to be taken care of by playoff expansion. If you care about whoever the coach is, getting the best players for your school, NIL right now is the avenue to go to. And I can let you know that where maybe 80 to 90% of Florida's total NIL revenue comes from is a lot of 15 big money guys here. And what they really need is, I think, a little more ground support and just propping that up a little bit so that Florida is able to compete maybe a little bit more in theory in NIL, because that's absolutely what's going to be able to make it so that you can compete for all those big name guys that I just mentioned, the Power 5 guys. That's how they're going to places like Texas A&M, Ole Miss. It's not because the athletic department is saying, hey, let's allocate things to NIL. Let's hold off on stadium renovations and put this money to NIL. No, it's because of big name boosters donating towards NIL. And that's what's able to get them to compete for some of these big names, while Florida maybe is is not quite there yet. They're obviously one of the top ones in NIL, but maybe there's a little bit more work to do in theory.
Yeah, and I think fans have a hard time believing that some of these other schools have more money than the University of Florida's NIL fund, and they do, for whatever reason.
Who's the billionaire though? Who's the billionaire donating to Florida right now? Look at Texas A&M. They got what, Exxon money. Ole Miss has got, million dollar boosters, 9-figure boosters who are donating to NIL. Unless there is someone out there, a few other names, guys like Hugh Hathcock, obviously. You obviously want to keep Gary Condren, happy and have him as a guy who's going to keep donating. But who else is there? Because I can name people, Phil Knight at Oregon. They have billionaires donating to NIL. And until that happens at Florida, maybe they're not going to be there.
Yep. All right. Before we get you out of here, Rod on YouTube, brought to you by Quality Plumbing, says, ask Graham, is Pup Howard a portal target from South Carolina?
I think it's too early to say. That's the guy who only entered last night. Florida was deep in the mix there throughout his recruitment. He's got relationships still with Florida players. I would be surprised. It's a position of need, of course. I'd be surprised if Florida has not already reached out to him and tried to set up a visit here. We'll see in the coming days for sure. I think he's going to have a ton of interest, a former top 100 prospect. It's a little bit too early to say right now whether he's a Florida target. It's possible that they've, like I said, already reached out here, but it makes a ton of sense considering they were deep in his recruitment until the very end. Position of need, like I said, relationships. This coaching staff recruited him heavily. They probably still want him. I would be surprised if Florida is not in the mix here for him.
Yeah, Rodney says here the UAA has to rally the troops to give to NIL. Again, that the UAA has nothing to do with NIL. That's where I think people are misunderstanding how this works. The UAA is responsible for the entire athletic association and operating it on a daily basis. They have nothing to do with NIL.
Y'all are the troops. Y'all, everyone out there watching is the troops. You go to a basketball game. Scott Strickland can do those messages now where he says, we've branded with Florida Victorious. He can come out and do video messages saying, donate to Florida Victorious. That is him rallying the troops. That is what they can do. They can say, give to this organization that we have officially partnered with them. They donate to NIL. That is them basically saying, hey, donate to this. This could improve the football team. That is the rallying.
Yeah. And then Mike B here on YouTube, brought to you by Quality Plumbing, says, Shane, I believe they should have delayed or canceled the new football facility, put that $40 million towards better players. NIL wasn't around when they built the facility. That's what people don't understand is, like I said, this is not an excuse for Billy Napier. It's just a fact. I think his plan, what he has from Georgia, Clemson, and Alabama to build a program, recruit, and all that was great. But the NIL portal hit when he took over, and all that's out the window now. So the facility, we needed the facility. We've been needing the facility for about 30 years. We were so far behind in that. So anyway, Graham, good stuff as always, buddy. Let everybody know how they can follow you. And I'm sure y'all got some kind of specials going on right now.
I hope everyone took advantage. We just finished our 60% off special. It ran for the last 2 weeks. I'm sure there's going to be another promo here coming soon. We'll have a ton of transfer portal recruiting news over at Swamp 247. Follow Blake Alderman, Jacob Rudner, myself on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Join the message board. We'll be posting all our transfer news here. There's going to be a ton of activity here before signing down, February 7th. So you don't want to miss anything. I'm sure I'll be back pretty soon to talk all things about it. It's going to be an exciting month. Absolutely. So thanks for having me, everybody. My pleasure as always.
Appreciate your time, buddy. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you soon.
Happy New Year. Happy holidays, everyone. Y'all take care.
That's Graham Hall. Join us on the Titan More Hotline, courtesy of Duffield Home Improvements. Going to take a quick time out. Come back. We'll be joined by the SEC ESPN broadcaster, Mike Morgan. You're watching and listening to PodUp with Matthews in the Morning. We want to take this moment to thank our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law attorneys of the Florida Gators. Peachland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. QC Kinetics, Live pain-free with QC Kinetics. Campus USA, put some star power to work in your financial life with Campus USA Credit Union. Dave & Buster's, eat, drink, play, watch. Duffield Home Improvements for your window, siding, and roofing needs. Radware, your local provider of promotional products, uniforms, and apparel. Our gridiron sponsors are Auto ER, UF Bookstores, Silverback Concrete, Ruse Ogre State Farm Insurance, Radware, F45, Quality Plumbing. Our touchdown sponsors are Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Okido America, Style Cuts, Ironwood Golf Course, Big Mills Cheesesteak, McDonald's of Gainesville, 84 Lumber, Dowling Signs, Baker's Sporting Goods, Silver Q Billiards and Sports Bar. If you're interested in promoting your business on the show, call Freddie at 352-284-3733. If you like what we're doing here, make sure to follow us and support the businesses that support us.
Hi there, this is Coach Steve Spurrier, and I want to let you know that by popular demand, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill's delicious brunch is now served in a premium buffet. You have spoken, we have listened, and we're now serving Gainesville's only elevated buffet, complete with an omelet station, ginger sage chicken sausage, shredded short rib, and of course our chicken and waffles. Plus, you can enjoy bottomless mimosas and Bloody Marys. So join us every Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 3 for the best brunch in town.
Back to the Crime Prevention Security System Studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Silverback Concrete's a family-led team of heavy concrete specialists that build commercial structures with unrivaled quality. Silverback Concrete, you stand on it, we stand by it. Going to go back to the Titan MR hotline, courtesy of Duffield Home Improvements. And we're joined by Mike Morgan from the SEC Network, ESPN, who's sponsored by Campus USA Credit Union. Good morning, Mike. How you doing, buddy?
Shane, it's been way too long, my friend. I'm doing great. I'm glad to be a part of this show. I watch it when I can in the morning. I so love your approach to everything, because there's a little bit of like, get off my lawn already with this. And I've been talking about this. I do a national podcast in JC Morgan, and then I jump on a couple days a week on a very similar to your show, a South Carolina show called ITG. And I see so many parallels, because both fan bases are frustrated. They're angry. They want answers. And I call it a pound of flesh syndrome. Like, the fans are so mad that they want a pound of flesh. They want to fire this guy. They want to fire that guy. They want answers. They want to point fingers. And you know what? The more I thought about it, Shane, you could extrapolate that to about half the fan bases in the SEC. Because when you think about it, not only Florida fans are mad, South Carolina fans are mad and disappointed. Obviously, Texas A&M, they're in a malaise, and they just had to fire Jimbo and go through all that, and they're wondering, what the hell is it ever going to get right here in College Station? So they're mad. Mississippi State's mad. Vanderbilt's perpetually mad or somewhat ambivalent. Kentucky fans are mad. I mean, when I was in Kentucky, my wife is from there. There are a lot of fans that wanted Mark Stoops gone, and then they find out he's flirting with Texas A&M, and it's like, well, wait a minute, no, I guess we like Mark Stoops. Well, now we're mad at him because he flirted with Texas A&M. So there's so much anxiety and frustration. Unless you're a Georgia fan or an Alabama fan, like, there's a lot of fan bases in this league that are just upset. Obviously, Ole Miss had a great year, but my point to all that is, for Gator fans, and I understand the frustration, you're not alone. Like, half the fan bases in college football are angry and upset, and I would say more than that in the SEC are not real happy with the way last season went. The question is, who's able to fix it faster?
That is a great question. Hopefully the Gators can get it done. Mike, before we jump into basketball, I just want to get your thoughts. We got the national championship game Monday night, Michigan and Washington, two really good football teams. Speaking of a mad fan base, the Alabama fan base is not very happy today as well.
Yeah.
Who do you think wins the game Monday night?
I want to say Michigan, but here's the thing. And one of the things I always say on my show is that nobody wants a talk show host that just brags about the games that he was right on or the things that he was right about. It's like a gambler who's losing money, but he only tells you about the games he wins, right? But he never tells you about the games that he loses. Meanwhile, like he's, borrowing money from friends. The team that I've been the most wrong about this year has been Washington. So like I picked against them in the rematch against Oregon. I think most people did. Remember, Oregon was a pretty heavy favorite in that game. I picked against them against Texas. I thought Texas had what it took to be in that championship game. So I got to stop picking against Washington. So I think maybe it's time for me to see the light. Even though Michigan seems like the darling right now and the team of destiny and the Harbaugh story and everything else, here's the thing about Washington. Like Penix is, for what he is perfect for that team and that system, and he's remarkably accurate on the passes they ask him to throw in that offense. He's got good wide receivers. And what really has surprised me is defensively, like we just assume, well, yeah, but they're probably a little soft because they're out west. And they've got some dudes on defense, too. And I'll tell you this, I only vote on two things every year. The Heisman Trophy winner, which for me was pretty easy this year, and Jalen Daniels, and the Home Depot Coach of the Year. And I gave it to Kalen DeBoer. And if you look, this is another reason why fan bases like Florida and others are frustrated. They look at what Kalen DeBoer did in a short amount of time after he replaced an awful coach, and Coach Lake and Washington was terrible. And then just 3 years later, they're playing in the national championship game. I think Kalen DeBoer has done as good a job as anybody in the sport at coaching and building that program so quickly, so fast. And, of course, he's the reason why Penix is there. Long story short, I'll take Washington in an upset over Michigan.
Yeah, I tell you, their passing game, those wide receivers they have, if they can give Penix time, and he does a great job moving around in the pocket.
Yeah.
He can give them some problems because Alabama didn't threaten them in the passing game at all.
Right.
At all. Milroe just he can't process the information.
Did you get the
enough.
sense, Shane, that I did as I'm watching that Alabama game? I sensed the play callers, they're sitting there going, we don't have enough faith in him to make a big throw here. We just gotta do a sprint draw or something. Like I never felt like they were confident to call a pass play in that situation.
I think early in the game, you could tell Michigan had a lot of tape to watch on him. Had a long time to prepare. And I don't think he redirected protections a lot of times that when he gets sacked. It was only like a 4 or 5 man rush, but they had a really good scheme for him.
Can I ask you? Go ahead. Sorry, one quick question. All those bad snaps, Herbie brought up a point. I know obviously the center had the yips or whatever, to use a baseball term, but he kind of hinted that he thought maybe some of those were a little bit on Milroe. As a quarterback, what do you think?
Well, we always like to say the best athlete on the field is the quarterback, because usually the quarterback at some point play multiple sports. You were the shortstop. So anytime a ball is like shoulder above your waist, quarterback should be able to catch it one-handed or whatever.
Right.
The low snaps are the ones that really screw you up. I always rather my ball, if it was going to be a bad snap, I'd rather it be high.
Right.
Because you can still kind of see what's going on the defense and catch it one-handed. Yeah. But yes, Milroe should have gotten some of those. But when they're real low and they bounce back, that's the worst snap you can possibly have. The text here on the Titan MR text line from Jonathan says, Mike, I really like listening to you call NFL games. Do you have any more NFL games? And what's harder to call, an NFL game or a college football game?
Number one, thank you. What was his name again? I'm sorry.
Jonathan,
thank you. And yes, I've got my final NFL game this Sunday. I will be in Nashville, the Jaguars, which we're hearing Trevor Lawrence is probably going to come back and play, and they have to win to clinch a playoff spot. They might be able to backdoor their way in. So I'm really looking forward to that game and seeing Trevor Lawrence for the first time since I called a couple of his games in college at Clemson. And, of course, they've got ETN, and, I mean, they're a fun team to watch, and they've been a great story. So, I'll be calling that game on Sunday before it's a steady dose of SEC basketball. The NFL is always easier in my mind because the roster is just so much smaller.
Right.
Shane, you know how it is. When you get your chart for a college game, there's so many names because you've got, again, an 85-man scholarship roster. In the NFL, you only get to travel 46, 47 guys. So the two deep is just that. It's too deep. You rarely ever see a third string guy out there. Whereas in college, some freshman comes out there and he's like fifth on the depth chart and he makes a big play and you got to scramble to find his name and number real fast. So believe it or not, even though NFL is quote unquote bigger, I find it easier to prepare for and call. And the other thing is the familiarity. Like I just mentioned, I mean, all these guys, when I look at my NFL depth chart, I'm like, okay, I remember him from college. You're dealing with known commodities, whereas in college, you got a lot of guys who are 19, 20 years old that are still trying to make a name for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Radware is a family-owned business that prides itself in excellent customer service while providing quality and affordable promotional products and customized apparel. Speaking with Mike Morgan on the Titan Moore Hotline, courtesy of Duffield Home Improvements, he brought to you by Campus USA Credit Union. All right, Mike, switching gears, SEC basketball play kicks off Saturday. The Big Blue Nation is rolling into the O'Connell Center. You've called some Kentucky games this year. You've called some Gator games. This Kentucky team, I think, is extremely talented. And I absolutely love the Shepherd kid because I loved his dad in college. But you were telling me before the program that you really like this Gator team. How do you see this game matching up?
I do. I've had Florida 3 times, and I'll have them again in January. I'll be back in Gainesville later this month, I should say. Happy New Year, everybody. This is what I would tell you about this Kentucky team, because the problem is the hype machine for every Cal recruiting class always makes you convinced that it's the best recruiting class in sliced bread. The fact of the matter is not all number 1 recruiting classes are built the same. Not all 5-star recruits are built the same. Not all lottery picks are built the same. This one, I can tell you, having seen them up close, is different. This is the best combination of freshmen, I think, since De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk. And this just in, those 2 guys are pretty damn good and are still having great careers in the NBA. He's had a lot of 5-star blue chip, blah, blah, blah guys that, quite frankly, Shane, I didn't think were that good. And just because you make it to the NBA doesn't mean you are a great college player for the 1 year you're in Lexington. These guys are good. You mentioned Shepherd. I would say I would add to that Dillingham is a great freshman. I love Wagner. These are the kind of guys that Cal used to get that I haven't seen many of in Lexington since. So long story short, I think it's their best freshman class in a while. I think it's their best team in a while. And this is the kind of team that certainly has Final Four potential. So when you look at this matchup, this is not exactly if I'm Todd Golden in Florida where the way I'd want to open it up. I'm glad to see it's already a sellout at the O'Connell Center. We announced that when I did the game in Gainesville back on the 30th. It should be an incredible atmosphere and a great matchup. And we'll see if those freshmen wilt a little bit playing their first SEC road game in an environment like the O-Dome. But I think Florida's going to have to certainly play one of its better games to win. I think from a just pure talent standpoint, Kentucky's not going to take a back seat to anybody really in the country, certainly the SEC. But Florida, I like this team for Todd Golden. What he did was he went out in the portal, and he didn't just grab players for the sake of grabbing players. He grabbed the right kind of guys. Florida's got a rare combination. They've got bigs that are versatile, and they can rotate 3-4 guys. And he's got guards that are versatile, multiple guys that can run the point, for example, with Clayton and Pullen. If Kugel ever comes along, which, you certainly hope that he will, now all of a sudden you've got a really deadly backcourt. But in the meantime, all those other guys are playing well. I like the way they play. They've increased the tempo. I think it'll be a really fun game. Florida will be an underdog, I'm guessing, but not by much. I think it should be a great matchup.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. When you look at the league, everybody says this time of the year it's going to be a grind, which it is, but the SEC has improved dramatically in basketball. I mean, look what Chris Beard has done with Ole Miss. They're undefeated right now. Who are some of the teams that, the average fan may not be aware of that could cause some problems in league play?
Here's the thing about the league that stands out to me, Shane, is that because we all look at it from top down, right? Like, okay, who are the best teams? Well, Kentucky is up there. Tennessee is up there per usual. Auburn is really good again. What impresses me about the SEC, and this is where the league has made so many strides, is that if you go from bottom up, the cellar dwellers last year, with the exception of Vanderbilt, are all dramatically improved. You mentioned Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a team that's going to be a problem for a lot of folks, and Chris Beard's an outstanding coach. That was a controversial hire when it was made, but it was the kind of hire that says, okay, we are serious about basketball. And this just in, I know what their NIL money is. They're serious about basketball, and they're not just spending money on football for NIL. They're spending it on basketball. That was baked into the contract for Coach Beard when he got the job. So they're dramatically better. South Carolina is dramatically better. They've only lost one game, and that was at Clemson, a top 20 team. They're better. Mike White in Georgia, they are better. So, I mean, the teams that you could kind of count on for maybe a dub last year, that's not going to be the case this year. So the bottom is much better. The top is always good. And then the middle is always strong. It's one of the deeper leagues in the country, because I think you're looking at an 8 to 9 bid league. That's early to say that, but I'd be shocked if this league gets fewer than 8, 7 at the absolute least. The point is that you're going to grind it every week. You got 2 SEC games, and every time you go out there, it's a team that can beat you.
Dan's got a question on Facebook Live brought to you by Mellon Law. He says, Mike, how would you have called the Grambling women's basketball win, which was 159-18?
I've had a few of those because I've done some women's basketball games, and quite frankly, some of them are so drastically mismatched, and obviously that was the case. Yeah, a lot of filler material, Dan. That's when you start breaking out the family photos. That's when you start so get that recipe ready for the holidays that you might have. Yeah, we've had them all in all sports where the game is over in the first quarter, first half, and you're sitting there going, okay, we got to do some work here. Those are always the most challenging, but if you make it fun and if you got a good partner to work with, they actually could be quite entertaining.
Yeah, Andy's question on Facebook Live here for you is brought to you by Meldon Law. It's a little off topic, he says, but is Caitlin Clark the most talented women's college player you've ever seen? She did it again last night. I don't know. She's the best I've ever seen. I don't watch her very often. But.
Yeah, I've never seen a guard in the women's game that can do what she does. And I know there's some other good ones, Paige Beckers, and we've had some other ones in the past, a ton of which played at Tennessee. And if you start comparing guards to bigs, she's not 6'4" and dunking the basketball and dominating the paint like some that have gone on to the pro level. But yeah, she's to me is like a female Pistol Pete. The range on the shot, the handle, the way she gets the shot off. She doesn't have to be like a wide open. You got to set a screen for her. That's not her game. She can get a shot off anytime against anyone. And that, quite honestly, that's pretty rare in the women's game. No, she is special. She is one of the few players. I think a lot of people out there are what I would call fringe women's basketball fans. Either their team is really good and so they feel obligated to watch, or if there's just somebody that is out of this world on top of the talent of everybody else, that to me is Caitlin Clark. I've never seen anybody quite like her in the women's game.
On the Titan MR text line, Georgia in Mobile wants to know, Mike, what's the best college basketball atmosphere in the Southeastern Conference?
The obvious answers to that are always like a Rupp Arena, which is so historic. I've done games at Allen Fieldhouse in Kansas, which is my favorite place. I've done games at Duke, the Dean Dome. There's not many I haven't done one at, to be honest with you. But in the SEC specifically, I'll tell you, to me, you don't have a great environment unless the students are heavily involved. And that's one thing where Rupp Arena is not to the level of some of the other ones. When Florida really got the student, and I go back to when I was a student at Florida, and you would get there super early and you would race to those seats on the bleachers, and you really felt like you were part of determining who won the game. And a lot of schools don't do that because those are big money seats, right? I mean, when you put your students right there front and center, you're losing potential revenue. So some schools don't do that. But you know who else does it now is Auburn. And since Bruce Pearl got there and since those students are right, that is actually, and I've said this before on air, that has become one of the best home court advantages in all college basketball. And who would have ever thought that you'd say that about Auburn? which used to be, if you go back to Beard Eves Memorial Coliseum, was one of the most staid environments. Just you could hear a pin drop. There was no juice in the building whatsoever. Auburn is up there. Arkansas is up there. Without question, Arkansas is one of the best. And again, they seat 18,000, so they're a huge factor out there. When Florida is really good, I mean, when Florida, and they'll pack it for Kentucky, I have no doubt that'll be a terrific environment. And their students are right there on top of you. I think that's one of the better ones. But those are the top ones that would stick out in my mind.
All right, last question for you here on Facebook Live. Dan, it was basically you were talking about Chris Beard's contract. He says, don't you think putting NIL money with the coach's contract is the way to go these days?
I think you're going to see more and more agents of coaches basically when they're talking to athletic directors and they're crunching numbers are basically going to say, okay, that's great. I'm going to be a top 10 salary, a top 20 salary guy in the country. Now, how much NIL money is baked into this contract? Because I can't win to sustain this job if you don't give me a lot of NIL money. I think that's the future. I think that's going to be part of the contract. It's going to be, what do I make? How many years? What is my buyout? And what kind of NIL money do I have to work with?
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy just to think that. But yeah, Ole Miss is they got a lot of NIL money. People don't want to believe it, but they do.
A ton. I don't know where it all comes from. Like, I know where A&M gets it. It's oil money, right? And some schools that you wouldn't think have a ton of money, like, for example, Wichita State for basketball. Well, they've got the Koch brothers, and they've got the guy that owns Geico, multi-billionaire out there in Omaha. I'm sorry, he's with Creighton. But Wichita State has the Koch brothers. Creighton, who doesn't even have football, they've got the multi-billionaire who owns a bunch of stuff in Omaha, Nebraska. So, and then random schools, Michigan State had their sugar daddy who now owns the Phoenix Suns. That's how you give Mel Tucker $9.5 million when nobody else on the planet would give Mel Tucker $9.5 million. So sometimes it's not just who's got, the richest fan base overall. Sometimes it just takes that one big deal. And I'm sure Florida's got, a dozen guys that fall in that category. I don't know who they are. Shane, you probably have dinner with them every night, you being such a high status person.
Yeah.
But
No.
but sometimes you'd rather have one or two sugar daddies, what I call them, than just a bunch of fans willing to pitch in, $500, $1,000, because the sugar daddy is the guy that can get you that money in a hurry. And sometimes it's that money in a hurry what makes a difference between getting the coach you want or landing the 5-star players that you want.
Yeah, for sure. Mike, good stuff as always. We'll have you on once a week during college basketball season, courtesy of Campus USA Credit Union. Let everybody know real quick again, you're going to be calling some games this week, and then about your own podcast.
Yeah, sure. By the way, I won't be in a hostage video next time. I'll have a better looking background. I'm on vacation here in West Palm Beach, but yeah. So Jaguars, Titans this Sunday. That's part of Compass Media Networks, and that'll be on several affiliates throughout the country, including in the fine state of Florida. Then my first SEC basketball matchup will be the following Wednesday, Tennessee at Mississippi State, two teams that were NCAA tournament teams a year ago and expected to be NCAA tournament teams again. And then JC and Morgan, we invite all you Florida fans. We've got SEC fans from all over the place. We drop that usually once a week and talk college football year round, and that's free on every format available.
Good stuff as always, buddy. We'll talk to you soon, my man.
Always enjoy it, Shane. Looking forward to joining you throughout the season. Thanks again, and have a great Happy New Year.
Absolutely. That's Mike Morgan. Join us on the Tight Number Hotline, courtesy of Campus USA Credit Union. Ruzoger State Farm offers a team of dedicated insurance professionals ready to help life go right with the right insurance options for you and your family. Visitogreinsurance.com. Give them a call at 352-240-1779. This Day in Sports, brought to you by Campus USA Credit Union. Put some star power to work in your financial life with Campus USA Credit Union. This day in 1993, the comeback. Quarterback Frank Wright leads Buffalo back from a 32-point deficit to beat the Oilers 41-38 in overtime in a wild card playoff game, the greatest comeback ever in NFL history. I remember that. That was incredible. So that's This Day in Sports, brought to you by Campus USA Credit Union. Again, I want to thank Graham Hall and Mike Morgan for joining us on the Titan Tomorrow Hotline. Hope everybody enjoyed today's program. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. Take care.